Okay, once again, good morning. I'm very glad to see you. Uh, and I hope you found the book on your drive and also the syllabus. Um, and at the end of the lecture, we shall have additional time in order to try to answer on your questions if you have such. Okay. So today we continue speaking about chapter 1, about the second part of the chapter 1, which is the philosophy of social sciences. And we shall try to make more possibilities to, on the one hand, distinguish social sciences from biomedical sciences, and on the other hand, to find necessity of speaking about using methodology of social sciences in biomedical sciences and methodologies of biomedical sciences into social sciences. So as we all can easily understand, science is one big branch of understanding of life which surrounds us. Another big branch is culture. One more is religious. And human mind is composed in a way that is permanently seeking, looking for connections between different branches of knowledge, different branches of science and culture, of culture and religion, of religion and science. Sorry, I would ask you, please, can you mute your microphones? Okay, just to avoid additional noise. Thank you. So, the science is so rich, is so rich, is so informative, and due to, don't you hear me? Do you hear me? Because I have everything correct. Ah, okay. Yeah, because my microphone is on and camera also. Yes, thank you. Yes, the noise is due to some students which do not mute their microphones. Please be so kind to turn off your microphones in order to eliminate the noise, okay? To reduce it. Henriette, thank you. All students which join us, I would ask to mute the microphones, okay? Thank you. Now I think it will be better. So, from the times of Indian philosophers, from the times of old Greece, of Greek philosophers, our mind tries to understand the composition of a universe and our place in the universe. So what is the relation between universe and us? How we are composed, how universe is composed, and if we can influence the further development of universe, or if the universe is the phenomena which strongly determines our behavior, our thinking, and our understanding of the same universe. So, as we are researching using different methods, the information, the knowledge is accumulating. So, due to the technical progress, due to the technical inventions, especially which took place from the beginning of the 20th century. Today we live in the epoch of the very rapid technical developments. The thing that we are now lecturing with you, that we have our online lecture, is one of the proofs of this, okay? We may physically be in different countries, but all of us can at the same time join the same class. So all this demonstrates once more that possibilities of invention, of technical instrumentalism, they are infinite. Okay? We can continue further, continue developing these possibilities. But the main reason, the main questions will be the same. We try to understand how we are composed only from medical point of view in order to treat the diseases, in order to prevent the diseases. Okay? That's why we need research to reconstruct what happens in the universe in case of our laboratories, using our lab facilities. Okay? So as the knowledge is accumulating very fast, all we need is to define it in order to sort, to group. You know, all definition may be quite subjective. It means that there are a lot of exceptions from the rules, even from constitutions, right? That's why countries, time to time, they change their constitution partly. So the same happens in case of the constitution of organism. So we permanently change our understandings of how we are composed, of how to treat diseases, of how to prevent them. Okay? So one of the main ideas how to prevent diseases is screening, which is a very modern idea. And with the idea of testing some abnormalities, some pathologies, before they are manifested clinically, in order to have a better outcome in concrete case. For example, in case of cancers, we are screening the patients. When to start the screening, how frequently to perform it, when to stop the screening. All these questions arise and they are answered during research. So that's why we are grouping sciences, we are distinguishing them in order to sort and to understand better. So we say that we may have two major groups of sciences. Biomedical, which you can easily imagine how many disciplines it will cover, everything from biology and medicine, and social sciences. A lot of sciences which dedicate their studies and their research to understanding human beings as spiritual organisms, as parts of the society, of civic society, as parts of the interaction and interrelation between other humans, between members of society. And we say that main distinction, let us say two main distinctions in case of these two groups of sciences, are that in case of social sciences, we say that social sciences are based on interpretation, and the final product of the research in social sciences is explanation. Remember it, please. Interpretation and explanation. In case of biomedical sciences, we say that there is no place for interpretation in biomedical sciences. In biomedical sciences, we are basing our knowledge or our understanding on knowledge. And the final product is understanding, knowledge and understanding. Okay? We don't have the luxury to interpret the effects or side effects of medications or vaccination. Okay, so today we continue about philosophy of social sciences. As we have mentioned during our previous lecture, philosophy, this term is very broad. There may be a lot of understandings, starting with philosophy as branch of science and finishing with our everyday philosophy, with our individual philosophy. I mean my behavior with you, with my family members, with colleagues, with university administration. So philosophy is a very broad understanding, broad definition of some concrete conditions. So now we start speaking about philosophy of social sciences. And the initial point is that we are using our abilities of interpretation in case of social sciences in order to explain the social phenomena. For example, when you will study something from behavior sciences or psychology or psychiatry, you will find out that my behavior and your behavior and every person's behavior is a result of a complex of conditions which act at the same time in a single context. Okay, the same phenomena. For example, the weather. The same weather in today's context is acceptable for me in one way, and tomorrow the same weather may start be acceptable for me in another way. What I want to say is that context is a set of instruments which characterize the world around us. We can call it context. In concrete type, this context is different, and on the same context, our reaction may also and will actually be very different, because a lot of factors play here crucial role. For example, psychological factors, for example, my biochemical acceptance of reality, in what mood I am, how many hours I slept last night, am I hungry or not, and different factors. So that's why we say that interpretation is a very subjective phenomenon, okay? Because when I am conducting a research and I receive a data and I am analyzing this data in order to formulate the conclusions, we say that I am interpreting the reality, I mean this data, which I have. I'm interpreting it based on my today's understanding of reality, based on my current understanding of reality. And what forms my current understanding of reality? My current understanding of reality is formed by the knowledge which I possess. So if I will conduct the same experiment after some 5 years or 10 years or 25 years, I would interpret the results in a different manner, because new knowledge is accumulated and new knowledge influences strongly on my understanding of the reality which surrounds me. So what I want to say is that my reality differs in concrete time and concrete context. This is the main difficulty of the philosophy of social sciences, because, for example, when we are reading some paper, some scientific paper in social sciences, we see that it is composed from methodological part, which describes the methods which were used in composing this paper, and also it describes the experiment or observation which I have conducted, right? So I'm using some ideas which were previously chronologically earlier expressed before me, okay, which some other scientists explored and expressed before me. So I'm taking their experience into consideration, and I'm basing my understanding on their mental activities, on their research activities. But if I will use very old methodological approaches, which do not take into consideration the current understandings of methodological approaches, it means that I will miss the scientific progress. And when someone will read my paper, he or she would say that, you know, the methodology used in this paper is not updated, is not contemporary. He speaks about philosophers or about researchers which used methodology some 50 or 100 years ago. For that time, it was quite nice and informative. But today, it needs to be updated. That's why in biomedical sciences, we are using only the articles for our library research, which are published as a maximum 5 years ago. Because our knowledge in our field is accumulated very rapidly, very rapidly. So all we have to do in this case is to stay updated, to stay updated. That's why we say that because interpretation is a very subjective understanding of reality, we have to adjust it to come close to new reality, to our contemporary reality. Okay? And when this reality passes, we need some time to think about it, to think about reality. We need some time to understand the effects, the feedback, and the changes, because all reality influence dramatically on the functioning of society. And society changes in a response to a new reality. For example, in 19th century, revolutions. In 20th century, 2 world wars. In 20th century, we had several pandemic situations in the world. And the 21st century, today, we are witnessing the historical pandemic situation, which will change the world in one or another way, but it definitely will change our approaches, our responses. And we shall find out new challenges, new possibilities to develop our activity, both physical and mental. That's why we say that we should be very careful with interpretation, and we should take into account, into consideration, all additional factors which are composing the whole framework of reality when we are interpreting something. Okay? So when we are working with texts, we have here one chapter which is the hermeneutic circle. When we are interpreting texts, it's very important, especially in social sciences. When we are interpreting the text, we see that we can interpret different parts of texts, and at the same time we can interpret the whole text, which is formed or built by different small parts. The same happens in case of biomedical sciences. When we are interpreting, for example, the regeneration possibility of liver, or the central nervous system activity, or the phenomena of hormonal disbalance, this is one reaction of our organism, response to the changing reality which surrounds us. But at the same time, we are interpreting the same hormonal disbalance on the larger scale, taking into consideration the whole organism. We speak not only about concentrations of hormones, but we also speak about how they influence our behavior, how they change it. Okay, so you see, there are different steps of understanding, of coming close to reality, how to make reality part of our life. So never mind you will work with texts or you will work with patients, you have to understand that you have micro reality, some small reality, and you have macro reality, which is organism. Okay? And the feedback and the response of the organism may differ, because when my hormonal disbalance takes place, some another mechanisms of adaptation are also activated in order to give me possibility to find way back, to come back to homeostasis. Okay, so that's why we say that interpreting the reality means understanding the reality. Okay, so if we say that interpretation as an instrument of social sciences may be used to understand phenomena, understand means the result of biomedical sciences, we say that we are combining research possibilities of different sciences, and the science which is divided into different branches in our experimental study, in our clinical trial, it is reconstructed as a one whole. It comes back to its historical period when the science was not divided. And the science was not divided because the information was pure, because we did not possess the whole ocean of information which we do have today. Okay, so you see that we may, across centuries, divide science into different branches. We may formulate different methodological approaches to scientific understandings, but time will pass and we'll go back when the science was one whole phenomena. And it's normal because, as we remember, and it is very nicely explained in your first chapter here, that we are not only physiological organisms, but we are also spiritual beings. We have our philosophy, we have our psychology, we have our understanding of what happens around us. Okay? Another factor, another three factors which are grouped here and which are very evident and very crucial in case of social sciences is power, ideology, and interests. Why are they grouped? Because they cover somehow each other. When we speak about power, ideology, and interests, we do not speak about them only in political framework. Okay? Can you imagine that some ideas which are dominant, even in science, it's very difficult to reject them. Now imagine that you are working at the medical school of University of Maryland, and you are working on composition of new vaccine. And this school has its own approaches how to compose it, this new vaccine. So if you will think about different way of composition, about different way of elaboration, of working on it, you will find some barriers discussing these ideas with your colleagues, because they already are part of subculture of concrete medical society, which determines their values, and they understand reality in a concrete way. They have their laws, they have their understandings, and if you will try somehow to change them, to violate these laws, to express some different ideas, you will not be very welcomed if you will have no possibility to prove them, these new ideas which came into your mind. Okay? So when we speak about power, institutional power, it's very important social phenomena. Institutional power means that some part of society is recognized as institution. We respect each other. The same in case of universities. Okay? We respect each other. We are creating and sharing. Please remember these two moments, okay? They always come and live together. You are creating and sharing values. What makes you society is that, what makes us a society is that we are sharing the same values. Okay? For example, we want to be civic society. So the values which are same, they connect us. All we have to do in this case is to understand new challenges. Values are changeable with the accumulation of new knowledge, because society which is very traditional and which is not creating new values has no chance to develop. When we change our values, it does not mean that we do not respect our traditions. No. When we do not change our values, it means that we don't want to develop our traditions. Okay? One Spanish philosopher said that tradition, in my understanding, he said, is not what happened, but tradition is my everyday life. What he wanted to say, to make emphasis on, he wanted to say that with my everyday life, I am creating new tradition. Okay? So tradition is not something which lived some several or couple or 10 centuries ago and which disappeared and which does not function. No. Traditions are values which are acceptable for us, and they are acceptable because we live with them. We use them in our everyday life to keep our understanding of universe and to develop this thinking. Okay? The same in case of ideology. Ideology means it's set of ideas which we are sharing, in which we trust. These ideas may be of religious pattern, of cultural pattern. They may be of political pattern also. We are democratic society, for example. Or we are more traditional, less democratic. Or we are communists, or we are more subjected to some social thoughts and ideas. Never mind which political orientation do we have. The main idea is that we are sharing this set of ideas which compose our ideology. So ideology, broadly speaking, when this term was composed, it's also thought about science of ideas, ideas and logos, ideology. So these ideas, even in the framework of the same political system, may be easily changeable. Of course, there will be some basic ideas, but according to concrete geopolitical and other situations, the expression of these ideas may be changed. So what do we say? We say that we are composed of some ideas which are accepted for us, but which we do change as a response to the surrounding reality, to concrete context and concrete time. Okay? And interests. So I said power, ideology, and interests. What are interests? Interests are which unites us, which composes us. We can say that we are composed either of values or of interests. So interests are not only political or economical interests. Interests may be also intellectual interests, philosophical interests. And here we have a very strong connection of interests and traditions. According to some approaches, culture or nation needs to have tradition of, for example, thinking. What does it mean, tradition of thinking, of mental operations? Tradition of thinking means that people who composed our society before us, I mean, my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, our ancestors, when they were acting, when they were part of their society, they were thinking. I don't speak about philosophical thinking only, mainly, no, or about thinking or reflection on economical issues, mainly, no. I say just thinking while acting, thinking while living, when thinking forms part of our everyday life. Okay? So we need to elaborate this tradition of thinking, because if our society does not possess this tradition of thinking, for someone, for some concrete individual, it will be very difficult to start thinking. It will be almost impossible to start thinking. Okay? Because thinking is like incubation. We need big period of time. We need some experience, which we call tradition or experience, never mind. The idea is the same. So that's why we can say that, for example, there are countries with strong traditions of thinking. For example, philosophy was very strongly developed in Germany, as one example. Okay, so we can say that in German society, the development of philosophical thought was one of the main mottos of development of own society. So interests play here crucial role. Interests demonstrate what attracts us, how we are composed, and what is our direction, where do we want to go, what society we want to build, and how we see not only our today's reality, but our nearest future. Okay? How could we develop our ideas, in what direction? These all will be based on our interests. And I repeat that interests, please do not relate them only to economical aspects. Okay? Because mainly when we see here that some country has its interest in this region, we mostly think about political or economical or religious or territorial or some other sort of interest. No. When we speak about interest, we think about our values. We think about our understanding of what happened in the world before us and how to continue from this concrete point where we are today. Okay? In our case, the interest is in this pandemic situation not to stop the study process, to continue working with students, okay, to let you have the possibility to receive knowledge which we are sharing, and together with knowledge we are sharing values which we are creating as academia, as university, as part of intellectual society. So our concrete interest in this case is that we cannot open our Bohua campus, but we can continue conversation with you. This is our interest. In order to let you familiarize yourself with new trends in science, in research, in culture, in medicine, right? Generally speaking, of what happens in the world and how can we change it? How can we change it based on our research in order to benefit the whole society equally, because we are a civic society. And our interest in this case is to understand what we need to continue working, to continue thinking, and to continue acting. So the next part in this chapter is about validity. What does it mean, validity? It means if in case of social sciences, we base our research on and our conclusions on interpretation, you can say, how can we trust to this research? If I tell you that my interpretative feedback will be different according to time context and different contexts which surround me in concrete moment when I am formulating my conclusions. You can ask me logical question, how can I trust to your conclusions which are based on pure interpretation? The only answer here is that if you may be sure that I strongly followed the research protocol, that I used all acceptable and recommended methodological instruments for my research, that I did not violate the rules of scientific conduct, and I do not form part of scientific misconduct, that I strictly follow all scientific sources, that I am eliminating errors from my research, that I'm doing my best as a researcher, in a few words, you can be sure that I did everything what was possible. And other researchers will come after me and they will continue my ideas. That's why I say that we need to have tradition of thinking, that we need to have tradition of approaches, tradition of creating and sharing, disseminating of knowledge and values. So my validity is based on respect of knowledge. My validity is based on respect of my own research possibilities. That I'm doing this not for myself, not to benefit the concrete researcher, in this case, not to benefit me, but to benefit you, to benefit students, to benefit your families, because you will be qualified physicians and you will have possibility to help a lot of people during your life and professional career. So validity comes from the idea that we are doing our best in order to support the health of society, in order to create new approaches of treatment of diseases, in order to facilitate the prevention of diseases and to let people understand how important is, for example, healthy lifestyle approaches, that we should not eat fast food, that we should not consume a lot of carbohydrates in our everyday life, that we should not be heavy alcohol consumers, and that we should quit smoking. It's quite easy. And then our approaches will be valid. And then you can say that your research, dear professor, is based on correct understanding of the reality. Because, you know, We are investigating and doing our research based on reality which surrounds us. We are treating the diseases which are evident of high incidence because we cannot treat or screen for diseases which are not diagnosed, right? We are composing the vaccines which are necessary in concrete situation because we cannot have new vaccination against some diseases which are not diagnosed till today. So that's why we say that we are products of our everyday life. We are not researching in topics which were interesting for people some 10 years ago, for biomedical society some 20 years or 30 or 50 years ago, because we already have a lot of answers on a plenty of questions. What we are researching today is our contemporary challenges, our contemporary pandemic situation. Some philosophical approaches how to avoid the development of the same situation in future, okay? Not to give possibility to repeat to this pandemic reality, to understand why it happened in order to prevent. And this idea, understanding the nature in order to avoid or in order to prevent or in order to eliminate, this idea is a very scientific idea. To understand in order to understand, to know its nature, to know its challenges, resolution, outcome, side effects, in order to make our everyday life better. So we don't speak that let us suffer today and after 100 years human society will live in peace and very happily. No, we have to work to improve our life starting from today, to improve it today, to live better tomorrow, to receive our best day after tomorrow. Okay? That's why we have to be sure in the validity of our scientific results. So generalization is another chapter. What does it mean, generalization? We speak about generalization when we use some quantitative methods, okay? In case of biomedical sciences. So we are observing some 100 patients or 1,000 patients, and the results of our clinical trial is generalized on the part of population or on the whole population. Okay, we are making some conclusions, some suggestions how to improve this research, how to make it more detailed, how to help future researchers to dig deeper in this direction. But in case of social diseases, social sciences, we also are generalizing something. For example, when we are studying cultural peculiarities of concrete region, for example, cultural peculiarities of countries of Africa or countries of Asia or Latin American countries, why do we need to take them into consideration? From different points of views. From our biomedical points of views, we want to know, for example, which genes are more active in our population. Because another group of genes may be active in another population. And the genes which are responsible for concrete diseases may also be responsible for another group of diseases. And in case of a lot of diseases, we speak about genetical predisposition of their development and manifestation and outcome. That's why we study family histories. Because if I am heavy alcohol consumer, it may happen that it is genetically determined because my father also consumed big amounts of strong beverages and his father. We may say that we have some family history of heavy alcohol consumption. It means that we have to find out the cultural peculiarities. We have to find out the economic background of our families, the values which are accepted and shared by members of my family. Why alcoholism became decision in my case, in case of our patient, of concrete individual, right? So all these questions need concrete answers, which we can receive from research. That's why we say that generalization is a very important tool and instrument, because we cannot include in our clinical trials the whole population of Latin American countries, even of a single country. We are dividing the groups into groups of children of concrete age, or we select patients of concrete sex, or concrete groups of diseases manifested. We are selecting some concrete variables which we are using to compose our study design. So that's why if we pay attention on one variables and we ignore in concrete research another set of variables, it means that we cannot reconstruct the picture with 100% accuracy. That's why we have a lot of parallel studies. Some researchers are investigating one set of questions, another sort of questions. And then we are putting it in a whole. We are reconstructing the reality, the cultural reality, the religious reality, the medical reality, the health reality. That's why public health is studying the health of the population, using and understanding the health as a whole as one part of our reality which surrounds us, because we can say that we are composed only biochemically, or only intellectually, or only economically, and other factors are not decisive in our composition. No, we are result of the whole phenomenon. That's why we use these denominations, this generalization as an instrument to let each other understand what is more acceptable in our situation, which instrument should we use to solve today's problems, because these methodological approaches are permanently changing. The methodological approaches are based on the reality we have, and these methodological approaches are also subjected to changings because our society changes. Okay, because we can say that during first 20 years of our century, some cultural understandings of reality were dominant in our society. So we are importing research tools which are more of cultural nature. After some 20 years, we may change our orientation and became more interested in religious life, in sharing some religious ideas. And it means that we shall use some methodological instruments which are investigating questions related to our understanding of religion, of comparative study of different religions, of understanding the main ideas of creation of universe from religious point of view. Or we may start thinking about culture as a mode of expression of understanding our life. For example, when people were painting some gods or expressing some religion ideas culturally. Okay? It means they tried to make evidence that culture and religion are two parts of the same reality. Maybe they thought that it's possibility of expressing themselves, to be more explicit, to make it more understandable for people, for future generations. Okay, what were the ideas which bothered ancient Greek philosophers, Indian philosophers before them? What happened in Rome, in Middle Ages, in Western civilization? What happens today in different countries, different cultures? We possess different reality. But if you will start thinking about the main ideas, about the main mottos, main drives, you will find out that the main ideas are the same. We think about birth, we think about death, we think about love, we think about good, and we think about what is good and what is not good, how to define that. And then we are generalizing our results. Okay? And we can even say that human understanding of reality changes across centuries. Human understanding of what is good and what is not changed across the centuries. Time passes and our understanding changes. Maybe one day we come back to understanding which was evident and which was very impressive for people in the middle centuries. And our mind goes back through centuries to find some sources for new understanding of our contemporary life, right? So it means that we should try to avoid elimination of ideas which we do not understand. Because if we don't understand some ideas, it does not mean that they are not important. We don't understand means that we cannot find the concrete and useful methodological approaches to understand the ideas. So what we have to do is to think broadly, and to help our mind understand things according to different approaches, using different methodological instruments. That's why we say that in different centuries, our ancestors had different approaches, which they considered as valid, which they considered as evidence-based. Maybe they did not use this terminology, but terminology is created by us. What matters is the nature, how we understand the concrete definitions. Okay? So what we need to know is how to be responsive scientifically to new challenges. Never mind these challenges are of pandemic nature, are of academic nature, are of economic nature, or political, or cultural, or philosophical, or religious, or historical. The definition of nature is also very individual and very subjective. What I consider historical, my other colleague may consider very contemporary, and for him or her, the concrete historical issues may seem very vivid, very full of life. And for me, it may be already part of tradition, which I would like to forget or pay less attention. So the main idea is to try to understand the set of instruments which researchers possess in order to formulate better the questions and later to try to give answers on them. This was what I wanted to pay attention during this lecture, and to recommend you think a little bit broadly and not to limit yourself with research only in biomedical sciences, because as I have already mentioned at the beginning of this lecture, science is divided by us artificially. We have divided the science into different branches with the only intention to understand it better. But this division of science is very artificial. It's very human, if we can let ourselves express this way. It's very human, it's very subjective, and it is subjected to interpretation. So please start thinking broadly, and you will find out a lot of new connections, between biomedical and social sciences. Because a lot of biomedical data could and need to be explained using psychological methods and psychological approaches. And a lot of diseases may be treated using psychotherapy, which means treatment activating inner forces of organism. No medications, no vaccination, but just inner activation of our forces, which are silent, which are inactivated. That's why we say that all we have to do is to think broadly and to connect artificially divided sciences into one whole. So please be attentive. For the next Saturday, we need to cover the whole chapter 1, and next Saturday we shall start speaking about chapter 2, which is dedicated to issues of ethics and scientific conduct. We are speaking about these topics permanently, because there is no research without ethics, and no research without scientific conduct. So that's why we say that chapter 1 is very important for us. It's introductory chapter in this textbook. And in case if you will have any questions, any suggestions, or maybe some topics which you want to discuss in a more detailed manner, please do not hesitate to ask me. So let's call it a day today. And if you have some questions, you can turn on your microphone and ask me. Okay, we have a couple of minutes, or if you wish more, for questions now. So I'm here for you. Please ask me. Any questions? Okay, if you don't have questions, it means I was very explicit and it makes me happy. Okay, then thank you for joining, for listening. I hope it was a little bit interesting for you. As you know, all these lectures, they are recorded and later uploaded. So you can listen to it as much as you need. Okay? Okay. So thank you for joining, and I hope we shall have possibility to meet next Saturday, same day, same hour, and same place. Okay, thank you for joining, and bye.